There's no question as to whether Paul was an apostle. The very fact that he had come to Corinth with the gospel and had seen many Corinthians turn in faith to Christ was a demonstration, not just that he was an apostle, but that he was apostle to them in a very special way. So what did his apostleship mean in a practical way, and how did that impact upon the Corinthians? Well, we're going to read about that in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 7 to 12. Who goeth a warfare any time at his own charges? Who planteth a vineyard and eateth not of the fruit thereof? Or who feedeth a flock and eateth not of the milk of the flock? Say not I these things as a man, or saith the law the same also? For it is written in the law of Moses, Thou shalt not muzzle the ox that treadeth out the corn. Doth God take care for oxen? Or saith he it altogether for our sakes? For our sakes no doubt this is written, that he that plougheth should plough in hope, and that he that thresheth in hope should be partaker of his hope. If we have sown unto you spiritual things, is it a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things? If others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather? Nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. There is a saying in the world that there are no free lunches. Generally, it is used to mean that nobody gives you a benefit without wanting something in return. It's a fairly crude idea, but there is a more positive side to it. It is true that when you receive a benefit from someone, it does place some kind of an obligation upon you. In the first example that Paul gives, he asks, Who goeth a warfare any time at his own charges, in verse 7. He simply means that if you join the army and go out to battle, you don't pay for the privilege. It's expected that the army will provide your equipment and look after you. It's the same if you're working for a farmer. You expect some kind of remuneration to keep body and soul together. Who feedeth the flock and eateth not of the milk of the flock, also in verse 7. And it's not just the way things operate in life, nor is it simply common sense. It is a scriptural principle. Say I not these things as a man, or saith not the law the same also, Paul asks in verse 8. Paul goes on to quote a verse from Deuteronomy 25 verse 4. Thou shalt not muzzle the mouth of the ox that treadeth out the corn. That's in verse 9. Paul brings out the point that the law is not simply about animal rights, although that is part of the picture. The welfare of animals does matter to God. God does care for oxen, verse 9. The principal point of the command was for us to learn the principle of reward for labour. That idea in the law was an expression of the character of the lawgiver himself, God himself. The point is that the person who works can have a legitimate expectation of provision, because he that plougheth should plough in hope. So how does this work out in the Corinthian situation? The principle was that providing the Corinthians with spiritual benefit should have been matched with a material response. They shouldn't be surprised by this. Is it a great thing if we shall reap your carnal things, Paul asks in verse 11. Carnal things in this context simply means material things. Paul could legitimately have expected financial or material support from the Corinthians, but, perhaps surprisingly, Paul wrote, we have not used this power. Verse 12. Paul had waived that liberty. He had not insisted upon it, and the question is, why? That will be the question that we try to answer in the next video.